Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Layman Rap Podcast. I am your host, Mr. 215, Irving Henderson. On today's show, we will discuss this weekend's divisional round of the NFL playoffs, including an in depth look at the matchup between the Philadelphia Eagles and the Atlanta Falcons. And in our weekly rant, how much of a joke is the NFL's Rooney Rule? So sit back, relax, grab a beverage, and lend me your ear for a few minutes. This is the Layman Rap Podcast. Greetings, everyone, and thank you once again for tuning in. I am Mr. 215 Irving Henderson, and I actually wanted to get started on today's program discussing the NFL playoffs and the Philadelphia Eagles and their game with the Atlanta Falcons coming up on Saturday. But then yesterday happened. The Philadelphia 76ers lost to the Boston Celtics in London yesterday, dropping their record to 19-20. They are back under 500, but it's how they lost this game that is really under my skin today. The Sixers built a 22-point lead uh, somewhere during the second quarter. And it fell to pieces. It fell to pieces yet again. This is now, at least by my calculations, the third or fourth time that this team has held a 20-point or more lead against an opponent. And against quality opponents. I don't want to make it seem as if they're blowing leads against some of the, lower level teams in the NBA. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're playing the Boston Celtics, the Golden State Warriors, or the Brooklyn Nets. You're coming off of a game in which you absolutely positively blew the doors off of a quality Eastern Conference playoff team in the Detroit Pistons. And you jump out to a substantial lead against your divisional opponent who is a rival. This is a rivalry game. This is not like you're playing against the Atlanta Hawks. This is the Boston Celtics. Fans in this city enjoy it when they see the Philadelphia 76ers defeat the Boston Celtics. I don't care where the Sixers are in the standings. I don't care where the Celtics are in the standings. The Sixers beating the Celtics puffs out Sixers fans' chests just a little bit. And to witness this team go down in flames again, horrible shot selection, horrible turnovers. I don't get it. At some point, I mean, youth is understandable. You can understand losing a game because of your youth. But at some point, it comes back to the head coach. At some point, it comes back to Brett Brown. Brett Brown has got to find a way to make his players know that these types of things cannot continue to happen. And, I hope that the Sixers fan base was not clouded by that one win over Detroit. I mean, it was a powerful win. Don't get me wrong. It was a very powerful and emphatic win over a playoff caliber team. But there are deficiencies on this roster when they are on the floor that just do not make any sense at this point into the season. And we can't use the Embiid didn't play excuse when things don't go right when he doesn't play. And he played yesterday. Joel Embiid played yesterday. So we can't sit back and say, oh, well, when Embiid gets back into the lineup, this team is going to, let's stop it. Stop it. Now, I know, they're a young team. They're still a young team. This does not, project where this team is going to be going forward. Because I know everyone likes to, make jokes about the process and trust the process, this and that. All right, that's understandable. That's understandable because for years, we've had to hear those three words come from this organization. But the process was not about 1 year. It was not about this year per se. It's about beyond this year. It's about, trying to field a playoff team this year and then going forward, adding the necessary pieces to continue to climb to the top of the Eastern Conference standings. But you're asking a fan base that has been, for lack of a better term, abused by this organization for years. So, I can understand when fans get to a point of frustration that leads to apathy towards this team, not wanting to watch, not wanting to go down to the Wells Fargo Center and take in a game. And games like what we saw yesterday only fuel more negativity within the fan base. Now, I know I saw the stat, the Sixers have had one of the toughest schedules over the first portion of the season. And for this team right now, nearly through the midpoint of the season, having such a tough schedule to only be one game under 500, along with Embiid missing several games due to injury, there's something to be said about that. That is commendable, but we don't reward almost in sports. We don't reward, moral victories in sports. Sports are beautiful in the sense that you either win or you lose. Period. There's no middle ground. And, if any smart alecky person wants to say, well, you can tie. Well, if you tie, you lost because you didn't win. Anything that's not a win can be considered a loss. So, we cannot continue to give the Philadelphia 76ers an out of moral victories. And we cannot continue to say, well, they held their own. Well, they did. No, it is time for this team to start winning more often. It is time for this team to start winning games when they have opponents on the ropes. You need to have a killer instinct. And I don't see a killer instinct in this team right now. They had the Celtics down, and the Celtics have veterans throughout their roster, so they are going to be able to, withstand certain hits and be able to be resilient enough to start to come back. But this is where the Sixers have to say, okay, in counter to that, okay, you're going to make your run. Now we have to counter the run that you're going to make to stay in control of this game. And they just get a deer in the headlights look when another team starts to apply the pressure. Almost the here we go again mentality. Now again, like I said, I did not intend on speaking about the Sixers today. I did not intend on having any basketball conversation at all. But that game against the Celtics really, really bothered me. And I wanted to kick the show off and discuss that with you guys. Uh, so what we're gonna do right now is we're gonna take a quick break, but we will be back. We're going to take a look back at the wild card round over the past weekend in the NFL and take a look at the divisional playoff games coming up this weekend. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. All right, we are back with the Layman Rap Podcast. And before we get the next portion of the show started, I'd like to let you know there is no publicity like free publicity. So if you're out there listening and you have a product or a business you'd like me to plug as a sponsor, I will gladly do so. Just send it to my inbox on Facebook, or if you're watching or listening on YouTube, just leave a comment below and I'll be sure to give you a shout out on the next show. So, wild card weekend was exactly that. It was wild. First, the Bills and Jaguars game on Sunday was quite possibly the boringest playoff game I've ever watched in my entire life. I consciously wanted to take a nap and stop watching the game because it was really infuriatingly boring. You were watching two inept offenses go back and forth. If you like punters, if you like watching punters, this was the game for you because it was a punt filled disaster in Jacksonville. I have never, regular season, preseason, postseason, I have never endured a game that was just so mind numbingly awful. Awful. The Jaguars, of course, won. Their offense, woke up in time to get the win. It was a Blake Bortles to Ben Koyak 1 yard touchdown pass. It was the only touchdown in the game. The Jaguars won by a final of 10-3 in one of the lowest scoring playoff games in NFL history. And if you want to know just how bad this game was, the combination of Blake Bortles, Tyrod Taylor, and Nathan Peterman combined, all right, combined, had 238 yards passing. Blake Bortles led the game in rushing with 88 yards. I mean, if this does not tell you how bad of a game this was, I really don't know what else I can say. Nathan Peterman had to enter the game. Tyrod Taylor was hurt, and Peterman did what Nathan Peterman does. He threw the game-ending interception, sending the Jacksonville Jaguars to Pittsburgh to take on the Steelers on Sunday. And this is a matchup that earlier this year the Jaguars won, and they were fairly dominant in this game. They intercepted Ben Roethlisberger 5 times. So the Jaguars are going to come into this game with a lot of confidence that they can beat Pittsburgh. Now, granted, the playoffs are a different animal. It's not the same, but if you've already proven to yourselves that you can beat a team, I mean that's going to give you a lot of confidence going into that next matchup. Uh, Steelers, of course, coming off of their bye week. Antonio Brown is expected to play. He sat the tail end of the regular season with an injury, but he is expected to be a go come Sunday. The Kansas City Chiefs were up 21-3 over the Tennessee Titans at halftime, and they blew it. They blew it. And if you heard our last show, I mentioned that Andy Reid, for all of his successes as a head coach, has been, an abject failure in the postseason. And his team, once again, choked. They choked. They absolutely positively choked. There's no other way to describe what happened on Saturday. This team, they were poised to win this game. They had the Titans bottled up for the majority of the game, and it turns into the Chiefs' NFL record six straight home playoff game loss dating back to 1994. It was a wild Marcus Mariota to Marcus Mariota touchdown pass. Mariota became the second quarterback to ever throw a touchdown pass to himself. And that sort of started the ball rolling in Tennessee's favor, and the Chiefs never recovered. Did not score in the second half. I mean, it makes little to no sense, and of course, there was some talk of fire Andy chants. Alex Smith is supposed to be on the trading block, so it's looking like the Chiefs are gonna go forward with Patrick Mahomes the second. But just unbelievable, unbelievable. We talk about Andy Reid being among the top level of coaches in the NFL. Right now, I gotta say, Andy Reid is Marty Schottenheimer with a conference championship. Okay? That period. He's Marty Schottenheimer with a conference championship. The Saints and Panthers, I predicted it would be the game of the week, and the Saints and Panthers did not let me down. But it did not look as if we were going to have a competitive game. The Saints really did an outstanding job of keeping the Panthers out of the end zone for the first three quarters of the game. The Panthers had to settle for 4 field goals, and it looked as if the Saints were in control. That game was over. Christian McCaffrey, 80-yard catch and run touchdown reception, and that got the Panthers back into the game. The Panthers found themselves in position to win late in the game, but a little bit of controversy here. Cam Newton was absolutely demolished on a hard hit. It looked as if he had a concussion, and he cleared concussion protocol. I don't even know if they even did a full protocol test on him on the sidelines. But, should he have been allowed to come back into the game after that? I mean, you wonder about these things. I know that winning is important to these franchises. But what's the point of having a concussion protocol in place if teams are going to, circumvent it whenever they can? We saw it earlier this season with Russell Wilson. We saw it with Tom Savage, who looked like a punch-drunk fighter when he was hurt. Tom Savage, quarterback of the Houston Texans, by the way. And the Texans allowed him to re-enter the game. The very next drive the Texans had, Tom Savage was under center, and he should not have been. You wonder about what the league is going to do in terms of tightening up this concussion protocol situation, because right now it's a farce. It's an absolute farce. It's a joke. They need to be more stringent with this concussion protocol policy. The Panthers, again, like I said, they had an opportunity to take the lead late in the fourth quarter, but I don't understand the play calling. I don't. And the Panthers have now hired Norv Turner, to become their new offensive coordinator. So I think the Panthers may be thinking along the same lines that I am as far as the way that game ended. I mean, you call four straight plays to the end zone when you had time. I mean, despite having no timeouts, the Panthers had plenty of time to be able to pick up chunks of yardage, get to the line of scrimmage, spike the ball, and try to get to the end zone. They called four straight plays for the end zone. And of course, it ends with Cam Newton getting sacked, and that was that. So it will be the New Orleans Saints taking on the Minnesota Vikings on Sunday afternoon. Almost forgot it will be the Tennessee Titans taking on the New England Patriots Saturday night in that divisional round matchup game. I will take the Pittsburgh Steelers and the New England Patriots to win on the AFC side of things. And I'll take the New Orleans Saints to beat the Minnesota Vikings on Sunday. So, of course, that means I've left one game out. And I will be back with a preview of the Eagles and Falcons divisional playoff round game taking place Saturday at 4:35 at Lincoln Financial Field. So sit tight. We'll be back with a preview of the Eagles and Falcons. All right, welcome back, everybody, to the Layman Rap Podcast. Well, Saturday, the Philadelphia Eagles will host the Atlanta Falcons in the first divisional round matchup of the weekend in the NFL. Gotta say that I am completely surprised that the Philadelphia Eagles are coming into this game as the underdog. The Atlanta Falcons coming in on the road after a cross-country trip from Los Angeles now to Philadelphia, and the defending NFC champions are 3-point favorites. It is the first time in NFL history that a number one seed has been an underdog in their first playoff game. Now I gotta say, I kind of understand where the odds makers are coming from. The Eagles did not finish the season, with a lot of momentum. And I can see how they slogged through those last three games, two in particular. I'm not going to put a bunch of stock in that last game against Dallas. The backups played the majority of that game. Yes, I understand Nick Foles did start the game. The offense did start the game. And they did look pretty lethargic. And that would be two games in a row, or a game and a half in a row, if you want to include the Raiders game on Christmas night before then. Yeah, I get it, but I don't get it. This is not a team that is bad. I understand the thought process of, well, Nick Foles is the starting quarterback, Carson Wentz is gone. That does not mean that all hope is lost for the Philadelphia Eagles in this game or in the playoffs. This is a team that is built on the run game. And I think that you are going to see a solid dose of Jay Ajayi and LeGarrette Blount on Saturday. And I think that they are going to try their best to run the ball down the Falcons' throat. Now, granted, The Falcons' defense was very impressive on Saturday against the Rams, and I, of course, predicted that the Falcons would win that game. And I know some of you may have thought that I was losing my mind with that pick, but the Falcons' defense was very impressive against the Rams. They held the league's highest scoring team to 13 points. Now, who was number 2 in the NFL in scoring this season? The Philadelphia Eagles. Now, here's the part where I'm going to tell you that I have confidence in the Eagles winning this game. Todd Gurley had 104 yards on 14 carries. Sean McVay abandoned the run game. I mean, Jared Goff had attempted 45 passes. And of course, you had the turnover by Pharaoh Cooper on the punt, the muff punt / fumble. So I think that the Rams had their opportunities. They just did not take better advantage of them. If Nick Foles comes out in this game and he doesn't turn the ball over, and the Eagles can get that ground game running, I think the Eagles win this game. I think the Eagles win this game, head to the NFC Championship game, and of course that means we'll have another week of the Eagles being the underdog, because it doesn't matter to me whether the Saints or the Vikings win their game. The Eagles winning this weekend, they will still come into the NFC Championship game as the underdogs. Now, the question I have, are they going to use that as motivation? Should they use that as motivation? Personally, I don't think that you should use that as motivation. I can understand why you would. The whole world is against us, and it's us against the world. It's Philly versus everybody. But I'll tell you this. I caution against that. I think the Eagles need to come into this game just ready to play. You have your home crowd behind you, and believe me, that building is going to be a madhouse on Saturday. This city has not seen a home playoff game in 8 years. Excuse me, 6 years. 5 years. Oh, 5 years, excuse me, 5 years. It was Chip Kelly's first season here. In 2013, that team made the playoffs. Excuse me, 5 years since this city has hosted a playoff game. That place is going to be a madhouse on Saturday. And I think the fans and the combination of the run game for the Eagles will be enough to carry the day. I'll take the Eagles to win this game on Saturday, and that's going to set up, in my opinion, the Eagles and the Saints in the NFC Championship game. I won't make any predictions further than that. One thing I will say, though, expect a very good game between these two teams. I think that we are going to be in for possibly the best game of the weekend, and it's going to be the first game. All right, that is it on the Eagles and the Falcons. We'll be back with our weekly rant, and we're going to close the show. So sit tight. We'll be right back with the final segment of the Layman Rap Podcast. All right, welcome back to the Layman Rap Podcast. It's time to close the show with our weekly rant. And today, our weekly rant is on the NFL's Rooney Rule. I have to, you heard me use some of the same language when talking about the concussion protocol as it pertained to, Cam Newton over the weekend. And I have to say the same thing. The Rooney Rule is a complete and utter joke. It's a farce, and I don't use, I try not to use harsh language on the show, but I have to speak honestly and tell you, I think the NFL's Rooney Rule is bullshit, complete and utter bullshit. I mean, you put a rule in place that you want teams to interview minority candidates for head coaching jobs. And what's the point? What's the point of interviewing a person for a job when you have no serious interest in that person as a candidate? I mean, I understand the reasoning behind the rule is to try and get more minority coaches, a look. But teams, for the most part, have already made up their mind who they're targeting to be their next coach. So what's the point of interviewing one or two token minority candidates for an opening when you've already made up your mind who your next head coach is going to be? And I bring this up because the Oakland, soon-to-be Vegas Raiders hired back head coach John Gruden this past week. Now, the deal was set in place the week prior. So the announcement was made last Friday, and he was officially introduced as the head coach on Tuesday. But according to reports, the Raiders were making overtures to John Gruden before even firing Jack Del Rio. So they had already made up their mind that they wanted John Gruden to be their head coach. In fact, reports state that John Gruden was basically asked, did he want the job? And if he was to say yes, he wanted the job, Jack Del Rio was as good as gone. Now, does that mean if Gruden had said no, Jack Del Rio would still have a job? I don't know if that may or may not be the case, but that is some grade A bullshit. They had already determined that they were hiring John Gruden as a coach. Now they're in trouble with the league for possibly, trying to skirt around the Rooney Rule, especially if it gets out that they had already had a deal in place before interviewing any other candidate. But even with that being said, what is the point of interviewing anyone of any nationality, any race, creed, color, religious background? What is the point of bringing in a candidate for a job you are not going to hire them for? It's like you got a help wanted sign out in front of the store. But you've already determined that you're who you're hiring previously. So why is the help wanted sign still in the doorway? Why is it still showing in front of your store if you've already hired your candidate? All you're waiting for is a formality. At that point, you've already picked your coach. And I understand that, again, you want these minority coaches to at least be given a chance, but they're not being given a chance. They're not. They're not being given a legitimate shot at these jobs. Teams already have it figured out. You can go on any sports site. I don't care if you go on ESPN.com, Bleacher Report, any of them, the score. You will see that teams are already targeting who they want. You know, you hear reports that the New York Giants are targeting New England Patriots coordinator Matt Patricia for their head coaching job. So they're basically telling you this is the guy that we want. So what good does it do for the Giants to bring in a minority head coaching candidate when they've already let it leak that they want Matt Patricia? I think there has to be something done to completely revamp this rule. It does. If you're not serious about hiring a minority candidate, don't bring them in for the interview. There's no point in bringing them in for the interview. It's ridiculous. It's not even a reality that that person's going to end up with that job. They can say whatever they want on the interview. They can, wow the GM. They can wow the owner. But at the end of the day, that team has already made up their mind. They already have their targeted candidate in mind and in sight. And they're going to get their targeted guy. And I am not, one of these, flag waving people, who identifies specifically with, my race and nationality. But we sit here and we talk about guys like Hugh Jackson getting another shot with the Browns coming off of an 0-16 season. Marvin Lewis, who has been mediocre for the majority of his career with the Bengals, he's coming back for another year. And you hear the argument, in these circles, like, why should Marvin Lewis come back? What has he done? I mean, for years, Jeff Fisher lived off the reputation of his one Super Bowl team. He lived off of the exploits of Steve McNair for nearly another decade and a half. So this conversation about, minority coaching and getting interviews, I think Roger Goodell and the owners need to sit down, revamp the Rooney Rule, and figure something out. Figure something out better than this, because the way it is constructed right now is garbage. Well, that's the end of our show, folks. Hope you enjoyed listening. I certainly enjoyed bringing the show to you today. We'll be back next week. We'll take a look at Conference Championship Sunday. Find some other things to talk about as well. You guys enjoy your weekend, enjoy the playoffs, and more importantly, enjoy life. I am your host, Mr. 215 Irving Henderson. You have been listening to the Layman Rap Podcast. So long, everyone.